All right. Welcome back to the thrill of the chase. My name is Paul. Here I am. My name is Paul, and this is my Paul's treasure search. Can't talk today. This is like take 10. I really do. I do multiple takes sometimes, and it's like, is the shirt straight? Is everything right? I did a bunch of production stuff. I made a PowerPoint presentation today, and yes, we're talking about the thrill of the chase, Forrest Fenn's treasure chest chase. So we have, all right, cool, right? We have PowerPoint presentation going today. So we're going to cut to the chase real quick, and I just want to talk about this. Here's Forrest Fenn. We see his treasure chest there, and you see him standing with all his books and his collection of Indian artifacts and stuff. And just really quickly, went through this like several times already, and this solve that I've had is old. I've had this solve for like 3 years, and then I get gas. How many times do we have to cut this thing? Okay, hopefully this is the last time. And I've actually wanted to like dump this solve multiple times, and this is probably like the 20th time that I've done like a video on it, and then like deleted it. But the solve is really old, and I think the thing I wanted to say was I understand this is like fraught with rabbit holes, and I mean we're doing like all sorts of like inductive leaps, and but imagination is more important than knowledge, right? Isn't it? Huh? Okay, so this was an early solve of mine, and I definitely like threaded the needle with a bunch of stuff. And my point was is that, and one of the things I wanted to make another point about is that at some point, you got to get out. And if you have a solve, you can't sit. I guess you can, but I mean, if you have the resources and the time, and the inclination, at some point, when you have a solve, you got to go out and check it out and see for yourself and see if you're right or you're wrong. And so I did that. This is all from about 2 years ago, and so here we go. Otherwise, this video is going to be really long. So let me swipe back. So here's my PowerPoint presentation, and everything looks good. All right, so we're going down rabbit holes, and I thought this was a fun graphic. Is it shows Alice in Wonderland, and a lot of people don't just throw some information out there. Alice in Wonderland was a book. It was written in 1865. It was a novel written by Charles Ludwig Dodgson, and he wrote under the pseudonym Lewis Carroll. Um, and most people know the story of Alice in Wonderland. It's about a girl named Alice who follows a rabbit hole into a fantasy world populated by strange anthropomorphic creatures. And if you don't know what anthropomorphic means, it's a rabbit that talks. We've made animals and other objects that are have human qualities. They talk. So anyway, she follows the rabbit down the hole, and I just thought it was apropos because again and again, we're told, Forrest said, that imagination is more important than knowledge, and then I just like the idea of this because it was kind of cool that I thought it was kind of cool that Alice is chasing the rabbit down the hole, and we're definitely going to do that today. So here's Alice again chasing the rabbit down the hole. And another thing that I thought was kind of funny about this is that the first line in Forrest Fenn's poem says, "As I have gone alone in there," and then he says, "and with my treasures bold," but he says, "I have gone alone in there." And we have a picture of the rabbit and Alice chasing the rabbit into the hole. I'm not saying, I am sort of saying that is you have to use your imagination. And one of the questions that I keep coming on my mind is, for me, it's a huge question is, Forrest, where did you go alone in there? And why did you go in there? What did you go into? It seems to imply that he went into something, but we're not allowed to go to structures. So that's a whole different thing. But we're going to go down this rabbit hole. So let's move on and say goodbye to Alice. So my solve this year was the home of Brown, and that was kind of like my focus of it. And so I made some assumptions, And the assumptions are that the thrill of the chase requires going to more than one place. Number two is it requires that we look at more than one thing. Number three is we're being guided to collect information along the way. Four is we can use the information to move to the next thing. And five, we use the poem as direct kind of directions, or they're clues to the next steps. So what I'm proposing, or my hypothesis in regards to the thrill of the chase, is my hypothesis is that you have to go to one place, and then you have to go to one place. I'm going to hold your hand up. You go to one place and you have to see something, and when you see that thing, then you have to use the poem. The clues in the poem, will tell you, and you look at the one thing, and then you'll be able to say, "Hey, there's got to be something else around here," and you go to the next thing, and then from there you see another thing, and in a sequence, right? You have to follow the sequence, because if you don't have the first thing, you don't have anything. So back to my PowerPoint presentation, and that was and still is a really strong idea that I have in regards to the thrill of chase. And I'm probably going to do another video at some point having to do with structure. What is a structure? And one of the vexing things is that Forrest Fenn has said that people have arrived at the scene having figured out the first two clues and walked right by it. Now that begs the question of, and everybody would assume that it is the chest. Is he talking about, was it the next clue? The next thing. And so we've got to be careful with what's said there. But we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about this solve. So we'll move on to the next slide. So a quick review. Let's see. I got to make sure that all these things are lined up here. We got to keep moving on. So a quick review. Forrest Fenn, as we all know, became wealthy from running his art gallery in Santa Fe. Okay, and then if you do research, and I'm kind of telling you this, and I'm not don't have this perfectly in line, but it's just from information I've read. But it seems to me, based on what I've read and from his interviews and writings, that Forrest Fenn, once he had reached a certain wealth level, running the Santa Fe Gallery, he was able to fly his plane, which he owned, a private plane, on his free time, and he was able to look for more art. I think also that having that kind of wealth and freedom, it allowed Forrest Fenn to pursue any interests. So he talks about that he had the interest in archaeology. He had interest in the West, the history of the West, of Indians, clearly fishing, and possibly those kind of experiences, because he talks about that he enjoyed being in wildlife, or though he doesn't talk a lot about doing that kind of like hiking experience. But I think he may have been doing that sort of modern contemporary hiking thing before it was a thing, but I think it always was, even way back as early as 100 years ago. And I'm not saying Forrest Fenn is 100 years old, but anyhow, that's a different story. Forrest Fenn admits that he finds famous people interesting, and I keep pointing at Tea with Olga, and also some other references that I did in another video. And at some point, Forrest Fenn may have come across a story of some famous person and went to learn about that person in their life, and that's where I'm jumping to this story. Is I think Forrest Fenn was the kind of guy who that, and I also don't think Forrest Fenn was he's not a country bumpkin. I think he's much more intelligent. I think you then given credit. I think he's a very smart guy. I'm not saying he's Albert Einstein or something like that, but I think he's no dummy, and I also think that, and I think he makes that point. Hey, I don't have a college degree, but you don't, and I think that was one of the arguments that he made about the archaeology, in the genre of archaeology, and that and that would be a whole nother video, is that he talks about, I don't need to have a degree in archaeology to pursue that interest. And I think he's right. There is a lot of indoctrinationism, and institutionalism of, and I'm just going to be talking specifically about archaeology, that you have to be part of the club, and part of the club is that you have a degree or degrees, and then, And I think Forrest Fenn was basically saying, "Hey, I could read books, I can go to the library, I can do research, and I could go out in the field." And so I think, went off on a tangent there, is that I think Forrest did that in multiple things, where he had interests, and I think like the bronze thing was an example. I mean, he didn't go to school or anything. I think he just said, "Hey, I find doing bronzes," and maybe because he could make a profit off of it, but maybe he had seen other people do bronze work, and he just basically said, "Hey, I'm going to figure this out as I go." And I think a lot of the things that he did were like that, and I also can conceivably see based on anecdotal information or from articles that I've read, that Forrest Fenn would be sitting in his gallery in Santa Fe, paging through a magazine, and he would read a story in whatever magazine, a national magazine of some kind, and it would get his interest, and he would say, "Wow, that is something I want to go do." And I think that Forrest Fenn makes the point about that other galleries had signs that you couldn't touch anything in the gallery. And Forrest Fenn said his gallery was different. You could come in and pick things up and look at them. And I think that's very Forrest Fenn, is that he's hands on. So when he saw something about a topic, so if it was Buffalo Bill, he may have done some other research on it, maybe picked up some books at the library or read an article in a magazine, but at some point just a Fennism is he gassed up the plane, threw his bag in the back, and flew to Cody, or to other places in Wyoming or whatever was part of his interest. And he would go and he wanted that visceral experience. He wanted to smell the smells and actually touch the things or be in those places and get that firsthand experience of it, of that topic. And I'm just using like Buffalo Bill in Cody, Wyoming, and the experiences of that person.